Welcome to Life in Alberta and a special fantasy hockey tutorial series. You play fantasy hockey, you buy the pool guides and pour through the stats and try to decide who are the best players that I can draft to win my hockey league. There are many guides out there, from Daubers to TSN to the Hockey News, many of them really good guides for the beginner. But do you want that edge on how you can win your fantasy league? And what are the best fantasy leagues that might be suitable for you? In this series, we're going to look at the ins and the outs of fantasy hockey, but ultimately we will focus on the dynasty leagues, because the dynasty leagues are the premium fantasy hockey leagues that you can get involved with. We will have our own Average Albertan panelist, Frank. Frank is a premier fantasy hockey league player, and as you can see, he has a win rate of almost 73%, closing in on 1,000 wins in fantasy hockey. He is a Diamond League player, which is again up in those elite ratings of Yahoo Fantasy Hockey. So he will be our special analyst as we go through this tutorial and try to give you some hints and tips and tricks on how you might be able to outperform some of your competitors. You can see Frank has won many gold and silver and bronze fantasy hockey tournaments dating way back to 2006. He also runs 3 leagues of his own, and he does very well in those leagues, winning again many trophies along the way. One of those leagues that Frank does operate is a dynasty league, and it is something that I've been part of over the last 7 or 8 years. So again, sit back, and I hope you pick up some pointers that give you that edge in your hockey leagues. If you have questions for future episodes, please leave them in the comment section down below. We'd love to answer viewer questions. This will likely be a 4 or 5 part series. This is only the first part that you're watching tonight, and it's going to focus on the general types of leagues that you can participate in. We will get a little bit more detailed as we go along, and ultimately leave our last tutorial with answering some of the questions that you might have. Lace up those skates, grab the stick, get out on the ice, and let's hear from a fantasy hockey expert. Today we want to talk fantasy hockey, and again, kind of an introduction, a 101 for those that are just getting involved in fantasy hockey and kind of, maybe be a little bit overwhelmed about which is the best option for them. And so with fantasy hockey in the past, when I was growing up, when Frank was growing up, we had the old time helmetless players, and we would get together with our friends. And I don't know if you did this, Frank, but we would just draft players and count goals and assists and keep track on paper.
Correct.
Yeah. And we'd rush to the newspaper the next morning because there was no internet, and we got 1 or 2 games a week on TV. So the newspaper was our source of information, and we would I'd open the Edmonton Journal and look at all the box scores and see who got the goals and assists, and go to my little notepad and update all the point standings. And it was fun as a kid experiencing that type of fantasy hockey. What were your early experiences, Frank, with fantasy hockey?
That was exactly it. You would look at the box scores and tabulate everything. It's the black finger era. So that was exactly it. Like, it was the same thing for baseball, etc. It was tedious, took a while, but that's what you did.
Yeah.
You
And
ran for the
then I
newspaper.
know in our leagues, we got to a point where Wayne Gretzky was getting too many points. We had to divide his goals and assists. So you could draft his goals or draft his assists, but you couldn't draft him completely because it was unfair and you were likely to win the league.
Yeah, Wayne is the reason why you have snaking drafts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oilers are, responsible for a lot of, changes in league rules, it seems, over the last 20 years. Now,
Yep.
fantasy hockey has taken on a completely different look. So digital, so easy to keep track of. You can watch any game depending on your TV package. And when players score because you can have an app and have a little horn go off when your team or your player scores. So it's so modernized today compared to when we were growing up. Do you see that as more motivation to get involved in fantasy hockey? Or do you think that the way fantasy hockey runs today, there's so much out there, it might be overwhelming to the casual hockey fan?
No, it all depends on it. You as an individual decide how involved you're going to get. And don't forget, there's the cash leagues. That's for the over-the-top serious players. And then there's the free leagues, the ones we do, which is just for fun. So if you keep it for fun, you're not going to get an app updating you of what happened that night on a Wednesday evening. Who cares? The season is long. But some people put serious money on the line. They're the ones that are going to pay for um, for services like um, fantasy hockey guides and things like that. But I don't. I just do it for fun. I love researching, and what fantasy hockey allowed me to do, uh, the way it's done on the computer, is enjoy hockey from other regions. Um, because before playing fantasy hockey, you follow your own team like everybody does. You know a little bit what's going on elsewhere with the superstars, but you don't follow the league. You follow your team. But when you play fantasy hockey, you have to follow the 32 teams a little bit. So that allowed me to enjoy hockey in general more. And this is prevalent in football. Football people love watching football. Then they like their team, obviously, but that's why they can have the Super Bowl anywhere, and people will watch it, even though it's not their favorite team, etc. Hockey's not that way. We're still regional. You see it with the ratings. It goes down when there's two teams that people, I don't care about them, But football, it's like ingrained. You watch the Super Bowl. It's the event.
Yeah.
So fantasy hockey helps with that because then you enjoy watching other teams' hockey games.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with football. I'm not as well versed on football, but I play, fantasy football on Yahoo, and it just makes the games so much more interesting when you have players that you've drafted on your team. And, as a kid, even as an adult, getting engrossed in the games, hoping you'd get that one point. And, referees' decisions. Is it a goal? Is it not a goal? And if you got that player drafted, you're so invested. Even though it's just one game, Frank, I know you say it's a long season, but many fantasy players live and die by every point.
Not me. I'm not that that involved.
I
you
know,
know,
I know you're not, but I know that when I was young, I definitely was watching the games, and every single point I'd want to squeeze out of my team. And even as an adult, if it's a close matchup, if you're doing head to head and it's Saturday night and you're down 1 or 2 points, you're rooting for that goal. You're rooting for those penalty minutes.
correct. Of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah. So in fantasy hockey, we've got Yahoo has always been kind of the standard from the beginning, kind of the early ones out of the gate to initiate fantasy leagues. And it's still going strong. I think this is what keeps Yahoo going is their fantasy. So many other mediums and sites have come out doing fantasy, but because they were the first, I think they've kind of held on to that number one spot still. And in fantasy hockey, you can join free leagues, you can join prize leagues, or you can join or create your own custom or private league. So let's talk first of all about the free leagues, Frank. why would you either suggest or not suggest that new players join a free league?
A free public league, you have to put
Public,
that. A
yes.
public league is anybody can join, and before the draft, they go in, they go out. You have no clue who you're playing against. It's very shallow because all the stats and the roster positions are set. I played it 1 year, hated it, hated it. Some managers, they lose at the beginning and they just stop playing. They don't set their lineups, etc., and they don't care. There's no investment because nobody knows each other. So, and a lot of streaming happens in public leagues because there's no cap on moves. And it's so shallow that there's no trades because there's a player that's as good sitting on as a free agent. There's no IR position. So, as soon as you get an injury to a big player, you either eat your bench spot or you have to drop him. And it's not as bad as other leagues because it is shallow. So you drop him and you wait, you pick up somebody good, and nobody wants your players because they play 2, 3, 4 games per week. When you stream, you can get 7 games a week. So your 50-point player is as valuable as your 70-point player. So
Yeah,
if you want to dip your toe in to see if you like it or not, join a public league. But I would strongly recommend you go to uh, posts and find people are always looking for managers in their leagues. So join an existing league and replace a manager, or get a lot of friends together and create your own league.
yeah. Totally agree. I used to do the free leagues, but stopped them fairly quickly. As you mentioned, managers that lose interest do not do anything with their team, and it's a dead roster. And the other thing is that even during the draft with a free league, a lot of times these managers forget and they don't show up. And
Correct.
so you've got three, four, five teams that are auto drafting, which again completely ruins the experience.
Yeah, and especially that because they auto drafted, they never show up and set their lineups.
Yeah. It's like, "Oh, I missed the draft. Oh, well, I'm not gonna care about this league anymore." Yeah.
Yep.
So, like Frank said, if you just wanna try it, I believe, Frank, you're allowed, what is it now, 8 Yahoo Fantasy Hockey leagues?
Per account, it used to be 4, but I think it's more now. But I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think I think it may be 8 that you're allowed. I wouldn't recommend as a new manager you'd go into 8 because you are gonna get overwhelmed, but maybe one of them you try as a public league just to kind of feel it out a little bit. Now, Frank, with leagues in Yahoo as well, there's 2 types in terms of the free leagues. There's the head-to-head and there's the rotisserie. What are the
Yes.
differences and which do you prefer of the 2?
Yeah. So the difference is rotisserie is you start and you go all the way to the end, and it's total points per position. That sees if you're ranking first, second, third, or fifth. There's no confrontation during the season between different GMs. So if you don't have a lot of time, head-to-head leagues, it says it every week you face a new adversary, and every stat counts for a point, and whoever wins that stat wins the point, and then you have an overall record at the end of the week, and every week you face a new opponent. So it's a little bit more time consuming. So if you don't have that much time, rotisserie would be the way to go. I don't play rotisserie; it's too boring. Head to head, there's more action because it's every day. You have to set your lineups, things like that. So I prefer the head to head versus the rotisserie. Rotisserie,
Yeah.
it's like golf.
Yeah, it really is, and the head-to-head is gonna require a lot more micromanaging and you to, check out your rosters a lot more often. A lot of times, rotisserie managers will, again, just kinda leave it, set it, and leave it and check back only once in a while. But as Frank said, it goes on overall points. So if your team has the most goals in the league, you get the most points. So let's say that it's out of 12 teams, you would get 12 points because you have the most goals. If you have the second most goals, you would get 11 points, and then 10, 9, all the way down to 1. And if there's a tie, as you'll notice here, then we go 0.5 based on the tie. And that goes for all the categories: goals, assists, plus minus. The higher you are ranked up in that category, the more points that you're going to get for your team. So if you're lousy in 2 or 3 categories, you're not going to win your league. You have to be consistent in all categories. Maybe you can let one slide, but any more than, 1 or 2, and you're going to be in trouble winning. Is that
Yeah,
fairly
and,
accurate, Frank?
yeah, and the beauty of those leagues, at the end of the year, you'll get a McDavid trade for Gudis because manager needs hits and pims from Gudis and doesn't need the McDavid points anymore. So because rotisserie are usually 1 year leagues. So if it's keeper, it's different. But you get these crazy trades that make no sense on paper, but make sense on the rotisserie format because you have a month left to catch up, like you said, because it's the total points that's a champion at the end of the day. So you have 1 month to catch up, so you have to hurry up. So you have these
Yeah.
wackadoodle trades that happen.
Excellent point. I forgot about that because I don't play rotisserie, but in a one and done season, you don't care if you trade McDavid with a month to go. If you need hits or block shots or penalty minutes, who cares? Because next year is a whole new season. So very accurate with the rotisserie. Whereas head to head, you still want McDavid's points all the way to the end of the season and the playoffs.
Correct.
The other one is the custom leagues. These are the ones that if I have room and time, I will get involved in. Maybe talk a little bit about what new players can expect if they go into the custom tab.
Yeah. So the custom, it says it. You have the default stats, and then Yahoo allows you to select from a bunch of stats for forwards and goalies, and then you can choose. Like PIM is debatable right now. So I have one of my leagues without PIMs. The other ones have penalty minutes, plus or minus face-offs. People say no, face-offs is BS. But to me, I have them because if you don't have face-offs, you shouldn't have center position because they're the ones that take face-offs. So you can really customize the stats you want. So Yahoo is behind the times on this because they don't have the advanced stats available as a scoring category. I think some of the other sites do. But that's it. It's custom. So you can choose the amount of teams you want in the league. So you can be 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, all the way up to 20. I think there must be a maximum, but if you go above 20, your free agent list starts to become very, very bare if you have 20 players per team. But everything is custom. So you can choose the amount of teams that make the playoffs. So if you have a 12 team league, so it's 6-6, but you can do 8-4. You, like I said, you go through the list and you choose absolutely everything that you want to have represented. So,
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about custom leagues is you can find personalities and people from your area. Sometimes it'll be an Edmonton Oiler fan league. And hey, then you can, join a league where you have some similarities with some of the other managers, or it might be an all hits league, an all goals league. You can create a rotisserie, a head to head, points only, so many different options. Some of them, there are fees. You can join cash leagues where prizes are paid out. It's a little bit better now because Yahoo kind of authenticates that they're not scams better than they used to in the past. And you get some that say, we want competitive managers only. So if you join those ones, you're more likely to get a competitive league rather than those public leagues where half the people might drop out.
Especially if it's a cash league. People don't drop out from cash leagues.
Yes, extremely competitive. And that's a wrap for tutorial number 1. Please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and we'll see you soon for part 2.